Okay, you okay? Wakey, wakey. Half an hour max. Right. As I mentioned, for those of you who have been up to date with the news and watching the UK news, you'll know that there is a major contentious issue at the minute with the new development. Sorry, I can't even see you. There you go. The development of a nuclear power plant in the southwest of England. The project for this has been going on for a while, in that, as far as these slides have been concerned, is about supplying extra energy to that part of the world so that these nuclear power plants can be up and running. As I said before, it's happened to be one of the largest projects of its kind in the UK in 50 years, and that's raised a number of issues. The consultancy that was put into with EDF to manage this project was said that there was a number of challenges obviously associated with this because of the significant visual impact that it had. So much of the initial work was about talking about communities direct and using communication channels and tools which explain why the project was needed. So it wasn't just about gathering people in the village hall and talking to them about what it could do for you. There were a number of different communication channels that were used to reach the community, the local community and the wider community, to communicate what was happening with regards to the benefits of this. They said it was complicated, as it required them to tell the story of how the energy sector works, because when you're talking to stakeholders, you've got to appreciate they know nothing about this. They know what they've been told in the media, they know they have their own preconceived ideas, and it's up to you to educate them in a different way, not you personally, but the project, the management of the project, to educate these in a way that will enable them and engage them within the project. The regulatory environment in which the National Grid operates, they also had to talk to them about how this is the regulation of the National Grid and the process it uses to evaluate the scheme design and the route selection. So why it's happening to them, why is it going along this particular route, and the requirements for this. There were 5 local authorities, 60 parish councils, 3 MP residents, businesses and wider public. So a significant different levels of stakeholders that were engaged in this project. So the different types of communication were needed, and different types of information were needed to capture all of these people. There was a disparity of benefits for the stakeholders because everybody perceived it in a different way, and obviously there was more education in some parts of the community, stakeholder community, than there were in others, and some perceived it more beneficial than others, so there was a disparity there. On one part of the route, an urban community will benefit from a reduction in the local wirescape as 2 existing smaller overhead lines will be taken down. So whilst they were going to benefit in this small area because the overhead power cables being taken down, other communities were not benefiting because power cables were being put up. And they actually called for the same procedure to happen to them that happened with the Olympic Delivery Authority, and that was for them. They were calling for them to run underground. But the need case cannot be justified in these areas. There's a disruption to the agriculture and the land, etc., that couldn't be rectified, and so these sort of aspects of the case had to be sold to them. So there's been a universal call for the connection to be taken up by the Severn Estuary, which would avoid this issue of visual impact altogether. But this has been rejected for the same reason. The Severn Estuary is a river that runs, is an estuary that runs through the southwest of the UK. But this was rejected on a similar basis.
Michelle?
Yes, sorry.
Can't be cold.
Noisy, I know. So the result is the majority of the stakeholders understood, or now understand, why they have to have these pylons erected on their lovely landscape, and understand how these National Grid has arrived at the solution that they've come up with, and why it is needed. So that's as it stands. This is what is being reported to us. It's okay.
Can you shut the door behind you?
The project has been accepted and is currently halfway through its this part of the project, this phase of the project. This phase, if you understand the larger concept of it all, is probably the relatively easy side of things. And the approach taken and the learning gained from the project are now being used by the National Grid on its other projects for transmission connectors throughout the UK. However, don't crash on me. Right, okay. However, this is an artist impression of the nuclear power plant. So whilst there was not outrage, there probably was at some stage, but there's some sort of misunderstanding as to why this was happening. This has now become a reality, and all over the front page news yesterday and today is the fact that this power plant is being built. And it's not the fact that the power plant is being built, because they knew that well, it's already there to an extent, but the new power plant is being erected. It's not necessarily that. It's all the politics that's surrounding this. So there's a whole different set of stakeholder objectives now. It's shifted from the more local economy to the wider economy. And so there's new considerations for the management of the project. One is British energy users to potentially have an expensive payments to EDF to supply energy once the plant is built. Homeowners and businesses will need to pay £92.50 per megawatt hour for the electricity over 35 years. Yes, I'm shaking their head. All the UK residents, it is outrageous. But this is the implications of this. So it's now reached a whole different load of stakeholders, a wider economy, and this has been elevated by the media coverage of this. So Britain is relying on France and China, which has been accused of hacking into their country's IT systems to build a nuclear power station. EDF, which is controlled by the French government, said national security agencies would be involved in checking that Hinkley's systems were protected. So there's a whole lot of controversy going on there. Also, the nuclear push has many critics over its cost, the time it takes to build the plants, and the potential threat to the UK's national security of having China in control of plant on UK soil. This is as reported by The Guardian this morning, or 18 hours ago, and you can see that whole article there. So this is what we talk about media management. Now there's a whole different set of objectives. Yes, sorry.
There's another aspect of this media management that's been overlooked.
Okay.
Right back at the beginning, when the project was in its original stages of public announcement, they stated that it would make a huge cut to UK household electricity cost because nuclear is cheap.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yes,
this one-
nuclear is supposed to be cheap, but there's a consequence to that, and that is the initial stages, which obviously is now saying, this is in the news yesterday, that it won't be cheap for quite a considerable time. So there is another aspect of this project which is coming up against a number of issues. So that's the most recent issue. They had a communication strategy for the initial phases. This communication strategy has obviously changed now, as of yesterday, but this was in place for the pylons that were being erected. So these findings for the communication strategy show just how important it is to have an understanding of the how and the needs of others, of the stakeholder, and why it's happening to me, how it's happening, who is it happening to, and the issue of trust, infrastructure popularity and acceptability should all feed into and inform the strategy. So this strategy should be informed by these three massive aspects, and trust, unfortunately, has already been broken on this case. However, that needs to be rebuilt. So ironically, a communication strategy is one that is mostly overlooked, and especially in most projects, even traditional projects. It is often, it's even though the communication issues are usually high on the project risk register, and this is something that is not normally taken into consideration. This is because communications engagement are not statutory or process driven and sit firmly outside of the project consultation. So this is one of the reasons why the communication breaks down, and why that it doesn't happen effectively. And we all know about having a communication strategy after having our seminar a couple of weeks ago, where there was no communication strategy other than you knew you had to get that structure built, and you didn't know how you were going to go about it. Luckily, unfortunately, you didn't have time to come up with a communication strategy, but would you have done even if you had? It's just a small point in the project deliveries that, as it says there, a piece in the jigsaw that is rarely considered. Objectives are softer and less tangible, but do lead to successful project results. As I said, this is not something that is process driven, but it is something that is less tangible. And simply put, the more effective the communication strategy, the greater chance the project has of aligning the stakeholders with the benefits and the needs that are required to achieve this project. However, a lack of communication, and we've talked about this before, a lack of communication can cause polarised opposition because of the group dynamics of the stakeholders that these can take shape. So you can have polarised ideals of what is actually going on if communication isn't done effectively. So there'll always be people who will never find a particular scheme acceptable. There'll always be the one person in the London Olympics who didn't want to move their house, and I've been here for 75 years, and it is horrible. It is not a nice place to be when you have to upheave people's lives in order for a project to take place. But there has to be a strong business case in order to do that. However, they are often vocal minority as part of the engagement, and they should be given the right space, but not the whole space. These people who do have these opinions about why they are not being heard as to why this is happening to them. And when I was at university many years ago, we talked about NIMBYs, which were the very negative side of all of this, not in my backyard. And now we have this new word called YIMBYs, which are yes to my backyard. Yes, in my backyard. So it's a positive slant on the NIMBYs, which is not in my backyard. And these are usually the silent majority. They probably do say, yeah, that's fine, it's okay, it doesn't matter to me, so I won't make a fuss about it. No news is good news from these sort of people. And they're the people who sit silently and could be a silent majority. And they should be given the space and the permission. So how do you not force people to communicate their opinions and to get them on board, but how do you to engage them in that way? And these normally fall into several categories, and these people are not normally aware of the whole extent of the project. They're too busy with their working day and lives, which is most of us, to get involved in these sort of projects. who have recently moved into an area and don't understand the implications of it, who don't understand how the project is relevant to them or feel intimidated by the local vocal opposition. And they're quite hard to reach because they're silent, really, and we don't know who they are and why their reasons for being like this. And they're not likely to be involved in this consultation process. And they also are people who are far too busy to engage in these things, like young mothers and those with connection with the area to a local community is spasmodic, so they're there for a small amount of time. They're very busy, they commute a lot of the time. So having the right messaging, tactics and tools can potentially engage and encourage all groups and interested participants. It is hard. How do you know what is the right way to communicate with someone? How do you know how to reach out to those people that are hiding behind the scenes, not voicing their opinions, but are not against what it is that you're doing? How do you get those people to come forward? How do you inform those people? So it depends on having the right narrative, having a good marketing department for one. And again, the CBI's findings show that not enough is done by projects to discuss concerns of the local people. It's very much done as a matter of process, and it's done as a consultation rather than an engagement process. So balanced and informed debates is not achieved by championing the national economic benefits, for example, and local communities are interested in how the project affects them, whether it will create jobs for them, offer of the business contracts to the local communities, and the impact it will have on the local environment. And if you're honest with yourselves, that is all you'll think about when there's a mention of a project within your area. You don't think of what the business benefits will be. It's how it will impact on you and your daily lives, which is not a wrong thing to do. That is just human nature. But it's important and imperative to anticipate these questions that will come up by people, to play devil's advocate to your project, if you like, and have some answers ready for that. And that's not very focused, but these are quotes from some focus groups that were taking part in some big major projects throughout the UK. And they were saying, don't talk to me about the boost of the country's GDP from a project. I just want to know how this will affect our local community. So it's about pitching it right to the people. We're not interested what it's going to have on people in another part of the world or necessarily. We want to know how it's going to affect us, how it's going to affect my life and my local community. The question should really ask is, would I like this next to me? And if they don't, they should cancel it or come out with another solution or another angle. So it's about, again, pitching it in the right way and anticipating these quotes from people. We can all do it if we put ourselves into their shoes and understand what they're thinking about how this would happen to me if it was on my doorstep. So there are a lot of parallels that I've drawn with the Hinkley Point C project, albeit not as destructive, but destructive to people in the local community in a similar sort of way. And so, as I mentioned before, this was a multifaceted organisation and had a lot of different multiple stakeholders involved, and it wasn't just about the London Organisation Committee of the Olympic Games, that's LOCOG, London Organisation Committee of the Olympic Games, and the ODA, the Olympic Delivery Authority. So the Olympic Delivery Authority were the deliverers, the builders of the park, and LOCOG were the organisers, the event managers, if you like, of the event. So had stakeholders such as the athletes, the people that were coming there, the then food and beverages and transport and anybody you can think about as far as the stakeholders are concerned. But I won't go into too much of that because we'll talk about into the seminars. So does anybody know how much how much the Olympic Games cost? What was the price of this mega project? Take a guess. Well, start in pounds. Don't give me in your own currency because would have a clue. I could say, yes, that's right. 30p?
30 billion.
Oh, 30 billion. 30
30 billion.
30 billion P's. No. Pardon? 20 billion.
11 billion.
11 billion.
Goes down.
Oh no, no one gets it. Right, 11 billion. Any advances on 11 billion? Going once.
Between 1 million and 500 billion.
Going twice. Building a map. 10.8 billion. Who said 11 billion? Well done, you. Well done. Okay, so 10.8 billion, and that includes the whole setup. That's the build, the events, everything. Okay, so the Olympic Delivery Authority was a massive amount of it. So that was the building of it, okay, the project itself. That was 6.2 billion of this nearly 11 billion pounds. That's 1.1 billion on the venues. Doesn't sound a lot, does it? Well, we're talking of billions here, we're not talking millions. Site preparation and infrastructure, transport, programme deliver, tax and interest, other Olympic Park projects, interest broadcast centres, Olympic and Paralympic Village, and the contingency fund, that tiny, tiny little bit there. That contingency fund was £88 million. Wish I had a contingency fund of £88 million on my little project. So, a significant mega project. So you can see where the public spending was used of this 10.8 billion. Other public spending was on the police, the park security, the local park operations, the operations provisions, the tidying up, pre-games perimeter security, community sports. You can see where all these stakeholders come from and where the money was distributed. So it's a whole network of communications for these people, because at the end of the day, it's one project, and it's quite scary how it was all split up. So let me just go back to it. So that puts into context with the £484 billion project for the infrastructure of the US. It doesn't really come into play, but it's still a major project. It's still a mega project at 11 billion. So, financial stakeholders. These financial stakeholders there was hundreds attributed to the ODA and LOCOG and the armed forces and the public sector funding and ordinary sponsorship. You can just see all of these people who had a financial stake in the project, and managing these people and communicating with these people at various times during the project must have been absolutely mind-blowing. That link's up there for you to look at in your leisure. So consider this. For the seminars, in the first instance of the seminars, because in the second part we'll let you get on with your assignment. Before, I'll talk about that in a minute, but consider, what are the challenges that London 2012 experienced? I've told you a few. I need you to recount some of those, and I need you to think about what they would have been, taking into consideration what are the other case studies that I've gone through today. What is the business case and the needs case for the Olympic Park, or the Olympics at London 2012? Who are the stakeholders in the wider community? What type of communication strategies would they need to consider? And clash of cultures, something we've not even touched upon in these lectures, which is a really interesting dimension to all of this, and how was that managed. So, your assignments need to be emailed to Robert, I believe, is what he's telling me, and that is on your brief. Does everybody know that? Did everybody know that? I sent him an email going, where are they taking their where are they putting their projects, their assignments? And he went, on email to me as on brief. And I went, okay. So you should all know that. So you've got to email each assignment to Robert. He will upload them onto the ELP. He didn't tell me a deadline, but I presume it's tomorrow after your seminars. Okay? That's your assignments. The assignment briefs. Okay? And we'll work on the rest of it this afternoon for some of you, and tomorrow.